Hi everyone, how you doing? A bit rainy again this morning, but yeah, that's okay, isn't it? Because it brightened up a bit later. So today's story is come from Wizards and Witches, and it's called Bobadil Becomes a Wizard. So if you're sitting comfortably, I will begin. Bobadil was a pixie, and a very smart one too. He knew how many beans made 5, and how much a pennyworth of sweets cost, and all the rest of the things taught by a good pixie school. But he couldn't seem to find any work to do, now that he'd left school, and he was all on his own. Nobody wanted him, and Bobadil was getting very much upset about it. I shall have to live with this town and leave this town and try somewhere else, said Bobadil at last. So he packed up his things, put them in a big red handkerchief, slung them over his back and set out. He hadn't gone very far before he saw a great crowd of pixies and gnomes standing at a street corner, talking very excitedly. "What's the matter?" asked Bobadil. "Oh, haven't you heard?" said one. "Why, the great enchanter Think-a-Lot is passing through here this afternoon, and we all want to see him." Well, Bobadil thought he really must stop and see Think-a-Lot. This is not going to be easy to say, this one, is it? So he popped his bundle down and climbed up a lamppost, as you do. No sooner had he done that than he heard a sound of trumpets, and round the corner came a magnificent carriage drawn by 6 white donkeys. In the carriage sat the enchanter Think-a-Lot, frowning hard and looking at a book he was reading, and taking no notice of all the cheering people. "My, isn't he grand?" cried everyone, tremendously impressed. "Just look at him reading his magic books and sitting there so grand and powerful." Bobadil thought the enchanter was wonderful, and he wished with all his heart that he could be an enchanter too, instead of an out-of-work pixie. He slid down the lamppost and ran after the carriage, determined to follow it until it was out of sight. On went the 6 white donkeys, trotting the carriage along at a smart pace, and on went Bobadil, fixing his eye on the enchanter's tall black hat and star-patterned robe. He thought he looked tremendously grand, and the little pixie longed to have a hat and a robe just exactly the same. "If I were dressed like that," he thought, "I should be able to get plenty of work, for people wouldn't dare refuse me." He ran along after the carriage, which grandly drew ahead of him, and was soon away in the distance. Bobadil still ran on, keeping his eyes on the cloud of dust that was now all he could see of the enchanter's carriage. He wasn't looking at all where he was going, so it wasn't surprising he suddenly tripped over something and fell bump onto his little turned-up nose. He picked himself up, dusted his coat, and looked to see what it was he'd fallen over. It was a book, a great big red and black book, and on the front was written, "Think-a-Lot's Magic Book." "Oh my," said Bobadil. "The enchanter's own book of magic. It must have fallen out of the carriage. I say, what a find!" He opened the book curiously and looked inside. To his great astonishment, the same thing was written on every page. "Take this book back to its owner. Take this book back to its owner." That was what Bobadil read ever so many times. "How can I take it back?" wondered Bobadil. "The enchanter is miles away by now. I shouldn't have thought it was much use anyhow, with just that one sentence written in it." He put the book under his arm, and he went on his way again. He hadn't got very far before he saw a cloud of dust in the distance. That became bigger as he watched. "Something's coming my way," said Bobadil to himself, and he watched to see what it was, and he was very much surprised to see that it was the enchanter's carriage coming back slowly again, with the enchanter leaning out of it, looking closely at every piece of road he passed. "Oh," said Bobadil, "he's missed his magic book. What a grand man he looks, to be sure." The enchanter stopped when he saw Bobadil and spoke to him. "Have you seen a big magic book?" he asked. "Here it is," said Bobadil, taking it from under his arm. "It's a funny sort of book, I must say. It's got no magic in it at all." The enchanter smiled. "Oh, yes, it has," he said, "but you couldn't see it. Look now, whilst I hold it in my own hand." Bobadil looked at the page that the enchanter showed him, and to his surprise saw that now it was full of curious drawings and wonderful magic words that he had never heard of. My, he cried, what a funny thing. What would you like as a reward for finding my book? Said the enchanter. Oh, said Bobadil, most excited. I don't know what I'd like, Sir Enchanter. Speak on, said Think-a-Lot. I'd like to have a tall black hat and a star-patterned robe like yours, said Bobadil. You do look so very grand. Very well, said Think-a-Lot. You may have them. And he said no more, but turned his donkeys round again and drove off quickly, leaving Bobadil staring after him in surprise. Hey, hey, cried the pixie, seeing the enchanter rapidly driving away. You haven't given me those clothes. The enchanter made no reply, and Bobadil felt dreadfully disappointed. He began to run after the carriage, and then he suddenly tripped and went down again, head over heels. Now, what tripped me that time? Wondered Bobadil crossly. He sat up and looked, and he saw that he had tumbled over a long robe that wrapped him about from his head to his heels, a star-patterned robe just like the enchanter's. There's magic for you, said Bobadil in astonishment. Have I got a big black hat too? He felt to see, and yes, he had, sat on top of his head. Ha, said the pixie, getting onto his feet again. I'm very grand now, I am. I'll make everyone think I'm a great wizard, and if I can't get a job to do now, well, I'll eat my fine new hat. He decided to go straight on and take the road to Twisty Town, a little place a good way off that would not have heard of either Bobadil, the pixie, or Think-a-Lot, the enchanter. On his journey, Bobadil meets a large brown rabbit who offers to carry him to Twisty Town on his back. And when they arrive, they are told about a bag of gold that has gone missing, and Bobadil uses his cunning to catch the thief. The townspeople are convinced that only a real wizard could have solved the mystery and give him some gold as a reward. Bobadil and his friend the rabbit are delighted to continue their journey. And tomorrow I'll read you the next adventure. So I look forward to that. I love you loads and sleep tight. So night-night Torben, I love you. Night-night Atty, I love you. Night-night Ruby, I love you. And night-night Max, I love you. Be good.